Okay. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Joseph Koppas, and I'm joined by my guest, Dr. Todd Strong from Cookeville, Tennessee, and he is practicing out of the Strong Health Institute. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Strong.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today, I understand you want to talk about kind of pain and suffering and how that relates to the brain, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's I'd like to elaborate because with the functional neurology training that we've had through school and through the Carrick Institute, I'd kind of like to elaborate about how we use certain methodologies or certain protocols to help people who are having pain and suffering and what we can do to help them, because with pain or suffering, quality of life tends to really go down. So the more pain and suffering somebody has, the lower quality of life. So if we can reduce the pain and the suffering, then ultimately we can improve their quality of life.
Absolutely. And there are millions of people who are suffering with chronic pain and various pain syndromes. So I think this is going to be a very informative topic. Maybe not everyone likes to talk about pain,
Right.
but we're gonna touch on it a lot today and try to provide some hope for some people, especially with what you're doing at the Strong Health Institute. So you had mentioned the Carrick Institute as well as functional neurology. What's some of your background, schooling and education, and what led you to this field, and more specifically, what led you to your passion for treating pain and pain management?
So I guess I'll just start back. When I was going to undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I was working at a family medicine clinic here in Cookeville, Tennessee, and I thought I wanted to go to through the medical field, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I was getting all my credits ready to apply for physician assistant school, and I was working in a clinic, and I kind of just saw how that whole system worked, and it just didn't seem something that I wanted to get trapped in and do for the rest of my life, because you weren't really resolving people's pain because they were just having to keep coming back for more pain pills, or, the opioid crisis is such a big ordeal right now that there just didn't really seem like there was any answers. And I'm a very avid um, athlete, so I spent a lot of time doing physical activity, and I actually had hurt myself, and I couldn't raise my shoulder above arm level. And I went to the traditional medical route, and it was just like, hey, here's a pill, it'll resolve. And I really wasn't getting any relief. And I went and saw a local chiropractor here in town. And after one adjustment, my pain went down from like an 8 to a 2. And then I was able to sleep. I was able to do the things that I wanted to do, working out wise and physical activity wise. And I was like, man, what is this? Like, what did you do? Like, you just took almost all my pain away with one adjustment. And so then I decided to attend Life University and kind of explore that. And while I was at orientation, I actually got accepted to physician assistant school. So it was kind of like, oh man, what are you going to do? So I ended up choosing chiropractic because I really wanted to understand how it works, and what happened. So that's what led me to going down the functional neurology route, was figuring out, like, how did he take my pain away? And all he did was adjust my neck, essentially. And so I had found the Carrick Institute, was talking around. I did applied kinesiology as well, but the functional neurology really helped me understand how the nervous system works and kind of how pain works, and why his adjustment was able to take away my pain so fast and so effectively.
Hmm. Okay. So the two main approaches that I heard you mention were kind of the functional neurology and the applied kinesiology, which are the two things that you've really taken to as far as practice.
Yeah, so I use applied kinesiology, which I use more of the protocols in applied kinesiology based on my neurological findings. So
Hmm.
I don't do as much muscle testing. I still utilize it every once in a while, but most of the time I rely on my neurological findings to kind of tell me, like, hey, maybe this is where the issue is stemming from. And I feel it gives me a more refined physical examination, more refined diagnosis, so that I can be more effective in treating my patients.
Hmm. And we've talked a little bit about functional neurology on previous podcasts. Um, we haven't had a lot of applied kinesiology discussions. So for those who might not be aware or familiar with the term, can you kind of explain what applied kinesiology is and how that really helps improve your treatments as in the functional neurology world as well?
Yeah, so applied kinesiology, they use manual muscle testing to kind of as a window into the nervous system to see if there are any issues going on at certain segmental levels. So they use muscle testing. They'll test a muscle and then say it's strong, and then what they'll do is they do what's called like a challenge to see if they put like an aberrant or kind of like I guess you would say a bad stimulus into the nervous system and see if the muscle goes weak. And then from there, they look and see how they can correct it, or they use it and they say, hey, this is the problem because it's causing the muscle to go weak. So that's kind of how applied kinesiology works, along with they use nutrition. They use a multitude of different therapies to kind of help restore function to the body, whether it's musculoskeletal, whether it's chemical, through nutritional modalities to balance out any biochemical imbalances. And then they also do some emotional work because, if we look at the brain and the limbic system, that ties into us really heavily, especially if you have like a traumatic event. The limbic system obviously ties into autonomics. So if you're constantly sympathetic, then you're going to have more downstream effects, more chronic diseases, as we see all the time. I think a lot of people are just sympathetically dominant, due to like the emotional side of life today. You've got work, you've got kids, you've got social environment. There's so many factors in that emotional limbic system that can really affect you, and addressing those, I think, is a huge component of staying overall healthy as well.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point, or you bring up a really good point about the emotional component of things and how, part of the applied kinesiology can address the emotional component of pain and kind of the vicious cycle that people tend to find themselves in after maybe being in chronic pain, and then these areas of the brain, tend to say plasticize, or they wind up, and this just leads to a vicious cycle. So possibly by doing some of your work with the emotional work and the applied kinesiology, can you sometimes break this cycle?
Oh yeah, for sure. So there are definitely some different things that we can do. A lot of the therapies that I have my patients do, or I have them do journaling, because I feel like if you just kind of get that out and you kind of have that limbic kind of expression somewhere, not everybody have somebody that they can kind of confide in, which I think if you do, then your overall emotional health goes up tremendously. And then also, I think just journaling, I usually have patients do it for 2 to 5, I usually have them do it 5 minutes twice a day, and just kind of get everything out, because if you hold up all that tension and you don't ever let it out, I think it kind of winds up in the brain, right? And you're constantly running those limbic circuits, rather than if you get them out on a piece of paper, then it's like, it's out, I've got rid of it. Then you don't have those limbic circuits firing, causing autonomic dysfunction throughout your whole day. You're able to focus better. You're able to fire your frontal lobes better. And we all know that frontal lobes have to do with your decisiveness, decisions you're doing throughout the day. So if you're able to make better decisions, your health is probably going to improve. You're probably going to have a higher quality of life. Another thing, I know there's a lot of research out about meditation currently. I have my patients do is Insight Timer. It's a free app, and it has tons of free meditation, guided meditation on there. And normally I like to have them do that, first thing in the morning or first thing when they're going to sleep. Another thing that I like doing with my patients for the limbic side, this is more of a neurological thing more than it is applied kinesiology. But I like to have my patients do contrast showers. Now, obviously, this isn't for everybody, so I definitely use a physician for or recommendation before you try this. But I have them do a minute hot, a minute cold of a shower about an hour before bedtime. And the hypothalamus ties really heavily into that limbic system. So, and you also have your thermoregulation in the hypothalamus. So, what I've found is that I can kind of use the similar pathways, the similar connections, and almost reset those pathways by using a contrast shower. So it helps my patients. They sleep great the next night. They're able to recover a lot better, and it just overall resets their whole limbic response the next day. So I have them do that. We just kind of talk back and forth depending on how they're feeling and what they need to do. Some patients need to do it every day. Some patients do it like 3 days a week. Some patients only need to do it once a week. But that is something that I've been experimenting with here, and it's real simple, it's cheap, and it's been really effective.
That's great. And you've seen some pretty substantial improvements in pain with a lot of these therapies. So great. Can you talk on maybe some other areas of the brain that you like to address when it comes to pain, especially chronic pain?
Yeah, so I work in my office. We have a DO here as well, so which is a doctor of osteopathy. So they're kind of a medical doctor, chiropractor combined. So we have the ability to prescribe medication if it is necessarily. Now, our clinic is very integrative, working with. We want to take people away from that because, not. I would say that most people's issues aren't a medication deficiency, if they're willing to address it through lifestyle factors and change it. Obviously, there are certain genetic factors and other processes that, maybe necessarily need the medication, but I don't think it's everybody's issue necessarily. So the thing that we like to do here is we like to try to bring them towards more of the alternative medicine side. He does acupuncture here. He does manipulation, and then I do manipulation as well. But the biggest bang for our buck for people with chronic pain is we reset a lot of muscle tone, actually using an applied kinesiology protocol called counter strength therapy. And so how counter strength therapy works is you find a painful counter strain point, which people will most of the time have a jump response where you press on it and they're like jumping off the table. It's so painful, right? Well, that's kind of a key indicator that they've got a really chronic pain or chronic pain sensitivity in that area. And the next thing that we do is we shorten the muscle down until the point to where there's no pain. And so once we do that, then we know we've shortened the muscle enough to change the tone in the brain necessarily so that they're not experiencing the pain anymore. And what we do is we let the muscle tone reset, and then we slowly bring it back into the normal length state. And then after that, most of the time there's no pain afterwards. And we do that. We have various protocols that we go through depending on, if it's a shoulder, if it's a hip, if it's a knee. And we've had really good success here with that. And my opinion of kind of what is happening is we're resetting the tone of the muscle length in the brain. And then that's not compressing, superficial nerve fibers. It's not compressing blood vessels. It's not compressing lymphatic tissue. So what's happening is you no longer have compression of those superficial nerve fibers with over contracted musculature. And then you're also allowing blood vessels and lymphatic drainage of the area. And so the area isn't ischemic anymore because now it's getting blood flow. You're getting all the toxic metabolites out through lymphatic drainage. So now patients are able to heal a lot faster. And, it's nothing like a miracle where they're just like instantly better, right? Normally what I find is my patients usually inflame 24 hours afterwards, but in 48, normally they have tremendous gains.
Yeah. Yeah. What what is one of the most common questions when you take this approach with patients? What's one of the more common questions that you get from patients? Because this is kind of a an alternative therapy, right? So people tend to have, a lot of questions. Uh,
Right. So yeah, that is the biggest, especially here in Middle Tennessee. That can definitely be hard to kind of relay because alternative care is just kind of coming up in the area and being more recognized. I know the West Coast is really progressive in the way that they're looking at alternative medicine and their treatments. And then I think it's slowly coming here to the East Coast, but definitely talking to them, we just talk about, the brain is the most important organ in your body, right? So the brain controls everything. And what I explain to a lot of my patients is that, you actually don't have pain fibers in your body. You actually have what are just called nociceptors. And what nociceptors are they detect tissue damage. So if you have pain, most of the time what that indicates is that you have some level of tissue damage going on in that area. And so whether it's cellular, whether it's muscular, whether it's the actual nerve fiber, whether it's biochemical, there's an issue. Pain is an indicator telling us like, hey, something is going on in this area that needs to be addressed, or it's going to cause further damage. And it's just a basic survival mechanism if we look at it from that standpoint. Pain is like, hey, you need to get away from this, or ultimately you're going to suffer from it, right? You're going to lose an arm or a limb, or you're going to lose function. So
mhm.
I try to tell people and educate them what pain actually is. And it's an interpretation in your brain that there's tissue damage and you need to address it, right? And then with that therapy, I just tell them, if we change the way your brain is reacting to it, and we take away these stimuli that are causing the damage, whether it was from an injury, whether it's from nutrition, if you're eating toxic things, you yourself will become toxic. If it's something, emotional, where you've kind of just got this wind up, because sometimes you can manifest. Certain pains due to emotional responses, right? And so that's kind of like on a different subject that we can take later. But and then also, if you have it's kind of like any other type of tissue damage going on from sitting all day or not getting enough exercise, not moving, then those are things that we like to address here.
Okay. And you had mentioned, kind of, I know we had mentioned earlier that that emotional traumas can sometimes perpetuate chronic pain, right? And you had just touched on this a little bit in what you just said, but with chronic pain, can we sometimes see like a perpetuation of maybe emotional traumas or emotional complaints, like, or things like depression, anxiety? Um, do you see that often with your chronic pain patients or pain patients?
Yeah, we see that a lot. A lot of the questions I get from some of my patients, especially at the beginning of, our treatment protocol is, am I ever going to get better?
Hmm.
And so thoughts turn into reality, right? So if you're constantly thinking like I'm in pain and I'm suffering, then that becomes a wind up in the brain, right? So the brain's just kind of how I explain it to them is kind of like anything else. If you do 1,000 bicep curls, you're going to get really good at bicep curls, right? So if you think 1,000 times a day that, oh, I've got this chronic pain issue, then you're going to get really good at experiencing pain, right? And so if you look at the basics of neurology and how that works, it really makes a lot of sense because your brain wants to be as efficient as possible. So the way that the neurons work, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible, if you're constantly firing those pain pathways, then eventually, let's say, even if the stimulus is removed, if that's been there for so long, then what's going to happen is that pathway in your brain is going to still be there. It's going to be really strong, and it's going to be kind of like a pathway on steroids because you've just worked it out so much.
Hmm.
So those actually are probably some of the hardest cases, right? Because then you have to go in and you have to break that pain cycle. And, even though your physical exam may say like, hey, there's no issue here, then that's when you have to start looking more at the neurological system and the brain plasticity. Did they really develop uh, and kind of work out that chronic pain pathway too much? And then that's where I come in and we do, the journaling's been really good, affirmations, saying positive things, because if you're going to break that chronic pain, like, oh, that suffering, that pathway, you have to think those positive thoughts to break it. You have to do the meditations really good, and then also, like I said, the contrast showers have been really good for kind of helping breaking that chronic pain thought process.
Great. And then a little earlier, you had mentioned also the autonomic nervous system and being maybe sympathetically dominant after you're in pain, or after you build up these cycles of pain and kind of depression and worry. How does the autonomic nervous system play in all of this? And kind of give us a little background of what the autonomic nervous system is and why that's important.
So the autonomic nervous system is kind of what controls everything that you don't have to think about doing. Like, you don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to think about making your heart beat. You don't have to think about digestion. You don't think about having to like form a bowel movement, or form urine or anything. So everything in the autonomic system is kind of automatically driven, right? So hence the name autonomics. So what those do, those allow you to kind of function throughout the day, right? Because you need your heart to pump blood throughout your body to get oxygen to function. You need your lungs so that you can put it into the blood so you can deliver it throughout the body. You need digestion so you can take carbs, fats, and proteins and utilize those for energy. And if you have any dysregulation of that, think about if you have any irregular breathing. So try like taking like a few really short deep breaths. Do you form like some type of anxiety? Probably, right? Because you're like, I can't breathe. So if the autonomic system and those mechanisms are failing to a certain extent, then you're going to have, you may develop anxiety, right? And you're like, why am I having anxiety? Well, it could be due to autonomic failure. And then same thing with heart. You're like, oh, I'm having this heart pain, or I'm having this heart issue. And the doctor's like, hey, you're fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with your heart. They do EKGs and they rule out everything. And you're like, okay, well, what's going on? Well, maybe it's a sub-threshold autonomic failure that they can't really detect, right? Even though you're having the symptoms and there's no pathology, they can't really tell you what's going on. Same thing with digestion. If you can't digest and break down food, you're probably going to get fatigued, and you're probably going to get lethargic, and you're probably going to have constipation or diarrhea or gas or bloating, right? Because you can't break down food particles as much. So what you have to look at is, well, I've been to every doctor, there's no pathology. Maybe you're looking at a kind of like a functional lesion, like we like to call it, right? So there's no necessarily pathology, but maybe you're just in under that threshold to where the function isn't as optimal as it could be, and it's on that verge of pathology, right? So that's kind of what we want to prevent and help eliminate. So we kind of, whether you're already there or we want to prevent that from happening. And then, so like your autonomics are controlled. So you have the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is, everybody says it's like your fight or flight, right? So it's either I'm going to fight the lion or I'm going to run away from it. So you have to shunt blood to the muscles to get away from the lion, or to fight the lion or wrestle it. So you divert all your blood away from like any other processes that are not relevant at the time. So like digestion, or any other type of, let's say, I guess you would say any type of digestion, any type of organ necessarily besides the heart and the lungs, right? So you get kind of failure of those systems, and then that's how you develop digestive issues, right? So if you're chronically in the sympathetic state, then you're not going to digest food as well either, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're not going to be able to digest food. You're not going to be able to recover as well either, right? So And then the counterpart to that is your parasympathetic system. So that's like your rest and digest. So that allows you to recover if you have any type of muscle injury, and that allows you to break down food and then convert them to energy so you can use them for the next day. So I think in today's society, we're constantly in a sympathetic state due to job, family, just overall lifestyle in general, right? So if you're constantly on the go and you're shunting blood away from like your digestive system, then you're not going to be able to utilize energy. You're not going to be able to make energy. So then you get these chronic fatigue, you get these depressions because we all know that food is kind of what you break down for the building blocks of whether it's like neurotransmitters, proteins that you need for muscle building. So then you get aberrant neurotransmitters, and everybody's on an SSRI today for anxiety or depression. And maybe it's just because you're oversympathetically wound up. You're not breaking down food in the stomach, and you're not getting appropriate neurotransmitters in the brain because you're having to convert all your resources into the muscles because you're in this chronically oversympathetic state.
Absolutely. And I think as clinicians, we see that more and more, with these high stress lifestyles that the standard American is living nowadays. In addition to that, you had kind of alluded to this earlier, but can you talk a little bit about diet, not just from necessarily a digestion standpoint, but an actual quality of diet that we put into our bodies and how that may help or perpetuate these pain cycles?
Yeah, so I mean, I think diet, there's so much research coming out about the gut-brain axis. So, if you pretty much what I like to tell my patients, if you eat inflammation, you're probably going to become a big ball of inflammation. So if you need to cut out like all your sugars, your hydrogenated fats. You need to really focus on eating, kind of like a paleo more type of diet. Now, the thing about diet that I talk to my patients is everybody's a little bit different. So what I try to tell my patients is be a little bit more intuitive about your diet. It's like if you eat an Oreo and you feel like crap afterwards, you probably don't need to eat Oreo, like it's probably bad for you. But, if you feel good after you eat like vegetables or you eat some meat, that's probably telling your body. And then another thing is like if you're getting gas and bloating after you eat a meal, then it's probably wrecking your digestive system, right? Because those aren't normal side effects of eating, right? You should be able to digest your food without any gas or bloating, any abdominal cramps. You shouldn't have any bowel pain. You shouldn't have like any constipation, any diarrhea, right? I think we've become a society where it's so abnormal to be normal that we don't even know what normal is. I hope that made sense.
Well said. No, yeah, it does.
So it's, I know on another podcast that I was listening to, it was they were talking about kids nowadays. Used to back in the day, kids, they were like, "You're on a medication. Why are you on a medication? That's weird," But now it's like today, our society is like, "Why aren't you on a medication?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the paradigm has shifted, and I think we need to shift it back. It's like it should be abnormal to be on any medication or have any issues, right? And I think a lot of that is just becoming in tune with yourself and kind of listening to your body and saying like, "Oh, hey, like stomach, like you hurt. What's going on? Was it that like quarter pounder cheeseburger that I just ate that maybe is causing some issues, or those chili cheese fries or kind of whatever it is." Now, I will say some people handle it better, right? Like some people can eat that, and that's a question I get a lot from my patients is like, well, they eat it, why can't I? And it's like, well, we're all biochemically different. So you can't say that A will work for everybody else, right? You have to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, infinity, right? Because we're all different. So that's something that I really like to address with my patients is, hey, how's your biochemical makeup? Let's become in tune with yourself. Like what what's the issue going on here? How do you feel after you eat this? Keep a diary. Do you feel bad after you eat that? Well, then let's cut that out. The gold standard today is still an elimination diet. You can run hundreds of tests and lab values and for IgG, IgA, IgM, IgE, all of that, but until you actually cut out the foods and reintroduce them and you're like, oh, that's what's causing my symptoms, then you really don't know. So I think that that's like the best way for me to work with my patients and have the best results.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Strong, we have covered a lot so far on this podcast, and we are just about out of time, but I really want to make sure that I give you a chance to leave our listeners with any final thoughts, and maybe any words of hope or encouragement for those who may be suffering with different pain patterns.
Yeah, so my clinic is here in Cookeville, Tennessee, right in between Nashville and Knoxville. So we're about an hour and a half away from any airports. We're kind of located in the middle of the East Coast. So if you have any questions, you can call the office. The number is 931-854-9393. Leave me a message. I'll be more than happy to talk to you. We do free consults here. So if you want a 10 to 15-minute consult and we can talk and see if we can help you, that's available. You can also email us at the Strong Health Institute at gmail.com. So that's available. If you want to shoot me an email, you can ask me any questions. I'll get back to you. And then I know you guys are up there in Chicago and doing great work up there. You got some really good doctors up there, some people I've known for a long time. And so, definitely if you're close to that area, definitely go see Dr. Koppas and, all of that crew over there at the, and then what's the name of your health clinic again?
The Neuro Wellness Institute.
Yep. Yeah. So, I hear you guys are doing really good stuff up there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Dr. Strong. Well, this has been great. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to share some knowledge with our listeners. I know that they're going to get a lot out of it. I know I have. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to helping people out, okay?
No problem. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. And then this has been your host, Dr. Koppas. Be well.